Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we're here with two ENTJs with a little bit of a special Enneagram flavor. So they're both Enneagram 8s, but one is an 8-wing 7, Abhishek, and then the other is an 8-wing 9, Shiv. And so Shiv has an actual meme to illustrate the differences, and I'm going to flash it on the screen just to give you guys the just for laughs before we start. And so it says that the 8-wing 7 is a typical ENTJ, and that the 8-wing 9 is like the 8-wing 7 ENTJ, but a more serious Sigma ENTJ flavor. So I just thought that was funny. And so, Abhishek, would you like to tell us a few words about you?
Yeah. Hey, my name's Abhishek. I'm a Enneagram 8-wing 7 and an ENTJ. I got into typology mostly during the pandemic. Just fell down the rabbit hole hard, and I feel like I've gained a lot of value from it. So I've been researching it for the last couple of years, and I met Joyce at a MBTI meetup around this area, and really like the community.
Yeah. So we're all Shiv's friends. I think the next few panels that everyone will see, or this panel, like we're basically gonna meet Shiv and then all his friends. Very cool. And we'll take it to Shiv.
All right, thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Shiv. Very similar to Abhishek, I'm an ENTJ 8-wing 9. We are also both software engineers. I also discovered MBTI during the pandemic. I used it as a tool for self-improvement, to improve my mental health, to improve my relationships with other people, as in how to help them, how to understand them, what to expect from them. And I also dived into Enneagram, not as much, but I did explore my own type to kind of understand the differences between um, myself and the other ENTJs I'd met on the internet, and glad to be here. I also met Joyce at an MBTI meetup, and I also already knew that Joyce was a YouTuber before I met her at the meetup. So I was like, oh, I met a celebrity today. And that was a nice feeling.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I'm glad that I met you too, Shiv. I barely meet anyone who's created their first business at 13, so I mean, impressive. So Abhishek actually mentioned a cool way to start this panel, and he was like, 8-wing 9, they almost seem like paradoxes. I wonder how they go together. How do these opposites contain themselves within an ENTJ? And Abhishek, why do you believe that these are weird types to have together, I guess?
I guess from I'm not the most informed in terms of Enneagram, but to me, 8 and 7 seem complementary. I guess more energetic, extroverted in like a certain sense, type of aggressive sort of ways of approaching the world, whereas 9 seemed like almost the complete opposite. So 8-wing 9 seemed like a very contradictory pair, which is why I've always been curious, about how it worked.
Yes, because almost the 8 and the 7 are double extroverted types, so they mend together. There's a more seamless, intuitive matching there. Whereas the 8 and the 9, you have a very 8ish type, which is very direct in themselves. And then there's the 9, which is more of the peacemaker. So it's an interesting pairing. So
Yeah, I while researching this type, I came across a very hilarious yet kind of true quote, which is it described 8-wing 9s as people who are badasses but apologetic about it. So yeah, I can be blunt, I can be direct, but I feel like unless it's needed, because um, when I was younger, I was a little more unaware of what my directness and bluntness could have an effect on people, emotionally speaking. So I always felt sorry about hurting people, stuff like that. And uh, I also agree with 8 and 9 being kind of um, opposites, because when I got typed as an ENTJ and I read the descriptions, it said ENTJs are extroverted, they're leaders, and I'm actually not extroverted in the social sense. I'm quite an introvert. I prefer doing things on my own. Spending too much time with people actually drains me. I keep a smaller social circle and the like. So knowing that, oh, you're actually an extrovert was a bit of a shocker in the beginning when I got typed. And it was only until I explored what extroversion means in the context of MBTI that things started to make a little more sense. I also used to think that I was an INTJ for the exact same reason until I met actual INTJs and INFJs, and I realized that while I might not be the most social person, I did have that extroverted energy of constantly going out and exploring and doing things on my own time, which was something I actually did not see in the introverts, and that kind of clarified things a bit.
Yeah. Shiv is way more comfortable with delegating things to other people, which is one of the many things that makes him more ENTJ more than INTJ. And so a lot of ENTJs are actually socially introverted in a sense, but I guess the 8-wing 9 has a extra special flavor of that because the 9's actually an introverted type in the Enneagram. And so it enhances that flavor. And it actually makes you even stronger NI flavor of an ENTJ. So the auxiliary function is stronger for you, and possibly even the fourth function, introverted feeling too, eventually as well, in comparison to other ENTJs, keep in mind. So we have a few stories to share to illustrate the differences between you both. And one of them is travel. And so you guys actually have a different way of traveling. And I wonder if we could tap a little bit into that.
Yeah, sure. Well, just I generally try to travel every opportunity I get. Ever since I did a year abroad in China, I just realized I really enjoy traveling. Um, and first few times I traveled, I did have very rigid plans. I have an INT. It's a very like it likes the Excel sheets, the maps, the all the data. But then, like, as I kept traveling more and more, I realized you'd meet a lot of people on the road who were traveling with zero plans at all. And they were traveling through much more, I guess, like dangerous areas than I was. And I kept looking at them and seeing, like, I mean, they're fine. They're living. They're having all these experiences, seeing all these cool places. So I started slowly as I traveled more and more to just as I became more comfortable with this base skill set, I just started stopping planning as much. Like I wouldn't book maybe half my trip, and then that would give me a little bit of flexibility if I meet interesting people along the road, stuff like that. I could join in on their travels. And then recently, I just tried a whole trip without an itinerary. Just flew in. I had 3 weeks in the country. I knew I was flying into Casablanca, flying out from Casablanca in 3 weeks, and everything else was just stuff I figured out on the fly. I still did research before, like places I'd like to see, but I sort of didn't have a plan until I reached the ground. My only booking was a single night, my first night, and it was great. I met some friends. I met some Germans who told me like this city was cool. There, I met some Dutch people who I joined for a little bit of their trip. I met some Americans who I joined for portions of their trip, and gave me a very interesting experience that I could not have replicated with a plan. So while I do enjoy my NI, I think as I've within the last few years, I've really enjoyed just the SE, no plan, just go in there and figure stuff out.
Yeah, and there are also more people incorporated in your travels too,
Hmm.
in a sense as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, were you saying something, Abhishek?
No, I
So, interesting differences. I haven't traveled as widely as Abhishek has. Let's start with that. So the few travels I have done, it has been not planned to the last minute, but I do want to leave some room for exploration, but there is like a grand scheme of, okay, how much time do I have? What are some of the things I want to do? How much time do I want to be dedicating to some things? And if I do feel like changing the plan along the way, I do. One thing I have learned by traveling by myself, with family, with friends, is that I have a preference for traveling on my own because then I get to do things at my own pace, on my own timelines, and my own budgets. I guess one of the biggest reasons for that is mostly just experience. Like the most memorable trip I've ever had in my life was 2 years ago when I went to New York City. It was a 4 day long trip. I was staying at like a very small hostel type of place. That's not something my friends or family would have been super comfy with. And I was walking about 25,000 steps a day for 4 days straight. Slept 11 hours across the whole vacation and was spending like I got a ticket to watch the to go to the American Museum of Natural History. and I had initially planned like 2 hours there, according to some of the TripAdvisor articles I found. And then once I got there, I was just so intrigued, being like an actual nerd. So I saw a couple of the special feature movies they had, and by the time the movies were done, the museum was closed, and I was super disappointed. So I kind of shifted my plans around and just scheduled a whole day for the museum and heavily focused on the space exhibits and the dinosaur exhibits, and that was it. So uh, my plan kind of fell apart, and then I had to restructure things. And one thing I appreciated was, because I was there by myself, I had full freedom to change my plans the way I saw fit. Now, if I had other people, they would have had some of their own plans, and I may or may not have been able to change things the way I wanted to with them around. So that freedom was very important to me. And a couple of weekends ago, I actually took my dad to New York to show him some of the places that I had already seen. So the reason I could travel with him this time was I wasn't exploring anything new. I had already explored the place a bunch now that I worked there. And so I just wanted my dad to be able to see some of the things he wanted. So I was more okay with going at his pace according to his preferences and stuff. I did create the whole plan, keeping his preferences and tastes and interests in mind. But I still have a feeling like my dad is super important to me. And despite that, if I had to go on a vacation to explore a new place, I would have preferred to do that alone. Now, I do realize from what Abhishek just said that it is a little bit close-minded, and if you do meet people who can kind of positively add to that experience, it would be a good thing. So that openness is something I guess I have to learn.
But I do think it's easier to start solo and slowly add people, because traveling solo, so many people, it's that initial bump. It's a very scary endeavor for a lot of people who've never done anything like it.
Yeah,
It's a lot easier once you've crossed that to just maybe meet next time you're solo. You'll talk to someone at the hostel. Maybe you won't. It's it's all a roll of the dice. Like when I landed in Morocco, I could have just not met anyone, and I would have probably been fine. Like I
yeah,
have like 2/3 of solo travel when I travel is completely solo, and that is the way I want it. Like I like the solitude. I feel like it's like the time when I can think the most, and
hmm,
in like a very foreign place with completely on my own. Just it's like you said, there's no obligations to like, oh, my friend doesn't want to wake up that early, or like don't like this sort of museum, this sort of food. They're not adventurous this way. They want XYZ. But if you know what you want, you can. We have the TE and the SE to be able to rapidly implement stuff, so we can
yeah.
sort of like solo travel. I think is good for people like us. But yeah, like like in the long run, it is nice to make a few connections on the road. Yeah,
I
I've met some
agree.
really cool people.
I think if I was traveling with people, one thing I would not have wanted to do is enforce everyone to stick to my schedule. I would have wanted everyone to have their own, and we just meet on the, you know, common points across our schedule. But I did once hear from a wise friend of mine that it is easier to go from being someone who used to being alone to being comfortable around people than it is the other way. So if you're used to always having people around, getting used to being alone is a much harder jump. So I guess I'm in a more advantageous position that way.
Yeah, so with Abhishek, he talks about how he likes more variety, or in terms of that he actively pursues more variety in terms of lifestyle experiences. Although that ENTJs, they are okay with being solo, being very independent people and very pragmatic people. Another thing too is the amount of effort you guys will put into if someone betrays you or does something to you, and like how much you'll do to get back at them is different for you both. And I think it's somewhat evident of your Enneagram type, so I thought maybe we could also dive into that.
Yeah, I mean, well, there is a story I had. I had well, once an aunt asked me to just visit a party for her on a Friday night. I think I was 15 or 16, so I would have typically just rather stayed at home or done something with my friends. But apparently, some cousin from uh, some distant cousin was visiting, so like she wanted me to say hi to him. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll make an appearance. But then I get there to this party, and the guy doesn't even shake my hand. Like I don't care that much about social niceties. Like we're both in this together. Like at least we're both somewhere we don't want to be on a Friday night. But like like we could just make small talk and then like go our separate ways if we don't vibe. But like literally within a second of like walking in the door, I tried to shake his hand. He just like looked down at me and like walked away. And I was like, oh, you know what? I know what Indian like immigrant families are like, as I'm Indian, and I was like, okay, I know his parents are gonna be ruthlessly comparing him to me if they think I'm the ideal cousin, if I'm like studious, sporty, entrepreneurial, like you just like all like a very ideal Indian like immigrant kid. So I my sister's an ENFJ, so I sort of borrowed a lot of the tactics I'd seen her do over the years and just ingratiated myself to like all the adults at that party. I made myself like I got into engineering, but I wanted to go into law after because like some of them were judges, and I was asking them about patent law, and it wasn't anything I really cared about, but it was just entirely a scheme just to get like this random kid's parents to love me, because so I know that likely later they just like complain to him constantly, like, why can't you be more like that guy, by just playing up to every single thing I could tell they wanted. And I ended up having a great night as a result. So it was one of the best Friday nights I've ever had.
Yeah, so the 8-wing-7 is more likely to actively get back at you if you're doing something that sucks to them. They're like, oh, I'll show you. So they put more effort into the revenge, and the revenge is more satisfying. They're like, yes.
Yeah.
I guess my approach here would have been very different. Like if I know it's a place I don't want to go to, I would just not have gone to begin with. Now, I know that's not always possible in a family context because family pressure is a thing. So this actually used to happen because I'm an international student. My parents live in India. I do have family that lives nearby. So I was often invited to friend gatherings that they used to have. So I always used to carry my laptop with me, and I was courteous. So I was polite. I would greet people and everything. But then I was also firm that I would rather do some work or study something, and that's what I used to focus on. So I used to request for some space, sit down with my laptop, maybe grab a snack or two, and then just disappear unless something else was happening. So I kind of ensured that my need for personal space and isolation and everything was met. I've also, like, when it comes to betrayal or disrespect or something, I usually have a very strict uh, acceptance criteria, let's call it, for people into my life. So I tend to be very selective about the people I'm placing my trust in or spending my time with and everything. So the chance of getting betrayed by them, I try to minimize it from the get-go because I think all humans have the capability. Now, that being said, if it does come up, the first, like if I'm the victim of the betrayal or whatever you want to call it, my first thought at that point is to not let their actions have an effect on me, because I would see it as me being influenced or controlled by their actions. So I would not want to let it happen. So I'm kind of like, I'll shrug it off. I will be on the lookout for similar behavior from other people too. So I would learn something, but I would try to minimize the impact. So if it's me who's been attacked, I'm not the more vengeful kind. I'm more of the mitigated, distance yourself from them kind of person. If it's my if it's my internal if it's my inner circle of people that's attacked, on the other hand, I get very, very vengeful, and I would actually try to make an example out of that person so that no one else tries to hurt my people.
Yeah, it's like I need to show you that you can't mess with me, and I need to show people that they can't treat me like this in general. And so I have to set some sort of example. It's more serious. Like when Abhishek does, Abhishek's more likely to have energy to deal with betrayals, but it's more in a lighthearted, like fun way. It's like, oh, you messed with, like you treated me poorly, I'm gonna treat you so poorly back. But it's more in a lighthearted, oh yeah, that was sweet. I did a great job.
It's just fun. Like it genuinely better than like just a normal peaceful night, like for me. But I do actually relate a lot to the inner circle thing. Like attack me, like yeah, like I'll just playfully like do something like that story I mentioned. But like yeah, like the inner circle is very like eights, I think I've read that eights are supposed to be very protective, and I do relate to that a lot.
Yeah, I think my approach is mostly if someone's trying to attack me, I would try to not let their attacks have any effect. So have defenses so strong that they can't scratch you. And then if someone goes out of your protective circle, I think all eights have that protectiveness towards their own inner circle thing. Like you're just straight up dead. That's not something you should do.
Hmm. Yeah, you're straight up dead to me. Interesting. How do you guys experience people being dead to you? Are they actually dead to you? Like, do you never think about them afterwards? You're like, nope, done.
Yeah, I've noticed. So this might be a little, controversial, but I've always tried to have this approach of try to be as independent as you can. And so um, don't put anyone in your life at a position where they're almost never indispensable, or if they are at that level. I have this formula for like how close someone can get to me, which is the positives that they add to your life are something you can never replicate, and the negatives are something you can handle. Like everyone has quirks and negative faults, no one's perfect, so I'm fine with that. But if they have potential for dishonesty or betrayal or stuff like that, that's an absolute no. It is very easy for me to decide, like, okay, this person has acted in so and so ways, has breached the trust and everything that this whole relationship was kind of built upon. So even if I'm feeling, even if I may have some lingering feelings towards them at a logical and operational level, that person is just out of my mind, out of my sight. I'm indifferent. My feelings are gone, and I can eventually get rid of the feelings too. So I've never broken up with someone or anything, so I don't know how intense the emotions there are. But I have had friends who have acted in very two-faced ways towards me, and they were like, "Oh, I know you're acting two-faced. Okay, you don't mean anything to me anymore." And that was near instantaneous because they were not in the position that I seriously needed them around for anything. It was they were nice people to have, but knowing that they were dishonest, I don't really need them around.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, and you have that A quality of not wanting to show weakness or vulnerability unless it's in a very, very I'm gonna be okay scenario. So like the
Hmm.
eight doesn't like to put themselves in situations where they're weak, essentially. And so you're making sure the person you love is not gonna make you weak in a way that you can't recover from. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think I relate a lot to what Shiv just said. Yeah, I think broadly I also just try to make sure, I can handle my own stuff. There's never a point in which I like a person is completely indispensable for me to me, like from a purely logistical standpoint. But like I have had relationships, and like you can't keep that up forever. Like like eventually they break through. And I think I've essentially gotten to the point where I value opportunities a lot. Like that's probably my seven wing. So I want to be able to handle betrayal. I don't want it to shake me too much, but I also don't want to let the fear of betrayal close me off from opportunities. So I think that's my main thing, where I want to return to a steady state of, like, I don't know if you'd call it optimism, but like at least like like you're like an sort of aggressive like mindset towards the world in a good way, like in a like I'm gonna take these opportunities head on. I'm not gonna let um anything that might have happened in my past limit my future potential.
yeah. Definitely opportunities can see that seven. Um when it comes to being ENTJs in general, I wonder if you guys might have started off with an eye on the external world. So maybe there was an external goal or vision that you guys wanted to achieve. And then maybe once you've achieved enough of that, there is a desire to go more internal in a sense. So the reason why I'm stating this is because when Shiv was talking, I was wondering what are the differences between ENTJs and INTJs. And I think one of the elements is ENTJs are often more externally monitoring until they realize that they've reached a level of certain success in a certain area, and they realize that it wasn't making them fully truly happy, and so then they look internally for an internal scorecard, and so that they try to figure out what are some less tangible, or what are some things that are harder to metricize but I want to value more? Like for Shiv, it was interpersonal relationships or a sense of community or relationships in general. But I wonder, like for Abhishek, it might have been like there are all these cool opportunities out there,
Hmm.
and I don't know what your internal scorecard looks like
Yeah.
eventually. I don't know if you've reached that yet.
Yeah, I think it's still a bit off, but I am starting to hit that wall. Like I rose, like I started my job, I hit senior fairly quickly, and then like after senior, opportunities are very based off of like, you know, what spots are available, politics, like all that stuff. It's not just, you know, nose to the grindstone anymore, which, you know, offers some opportunities, but also like it means like the path forward is a lot less clear than it used to be for my entire life up till this point. Like when you're in school, like you get to the next grade. When you're in uni, you get the degree. And but then once you start work, like the goals are entirely your own. And like often the best opportunities are ones you can't plan around. It's, you know, like your boss says, like, oh, here's a project. Like you like I think you should take it on and you need to jump on it and like roll with it. So like I feel like I am starting to hit to the point where I'm craving some bigger goals. Like I've just done made a lot of money on the side, just doing small things here and there, and like I really enjoy the whole process of like having an idea, building something, creating it, seeing if it actually works. So I do think like my FI wants its you know, independence from the corporate shackles and wants to just do its own thing a little. It just taking me a little to figure out what exactly it is that like I want to do. You know, stuff like travel and stuff, entrepreneurial pursuits. Like they always scratch some part of that FI itch. So definitely, yeah, that's a direction I'm looking into.
Yeah, I guess I could maybe take a couple minutes and dive into a bit of a story-like thing. So I moved to Canada in 2016 because my goal was to become a game developer at the time. And while I was at university, I was, you know, doing university things, making friends, joining like organizations across campus, trying some extracurricular stuff. And that because I realized I was spreading myself way too thin, so I had to pick the things that were most important to me, which at the time were just getting my grades up, adding more skills so that I could get internships and taking care of my health because I used to be in a very unhealthy state at the time. So as a result of that, I had to cut back on extracurriculars, social activities, all stuff like that. Um, and by the time I graduated, it was also the pandemic. So I thankfully did graduate and had a job as a game developer in hand by the time I graduated. So I did achieve those goals. And then when that goal was achieved, I looked at improving my lifestyle a little bit more. So I realized I needed a better income, and that's the next thing I started targeting. It was like the final piece in having a comfortable life, you could say. So I achieved that. So I got a job which challenges me, is super exciting. I work with some great people. Um, I'm financially comfortable, no complaints really, and I see a future here. So it that also allowed me to live in a place where I wanted, where I could do the things I wanted. I live on my own, so more independence and autonomy that way. And like you said, after achieving all these like external goals of you need money and this job and live in this place and have this infrastructure and everything, I started looking back on what I had given up to get to this point. And so it was a very shocking change for me from being like hyper career focused for well, since I was 14, so almost 10 years straight, to now focusing on interpersonal relationships and mental health and my social skills and building a network of people and stuff. And thankfully, I think I've brought it up to a good level where now, at the start of this year, actually, I was feeling, okay, I need to get back on track and what are my goals for the next 10 years and stuff. So thankfully, I did decide my goals. Some surprisingly, my FI helps me set those goals. Like, what do I really want in my life, and how to go after it? Is it something that's good to achieve? So I did set the goals, I made the plans, and have started working on them. The transition takes a while, so I'm not as productive as like the stereotypes or other people think I am. But the good thing is, it's something I'm doing for myself. I don't have to prove to the world that hey, I'm doing this or something. So it's my own pace, and I can do it at my own comfort and pace and preference. So I think it's a good position to be in. But yeah, I'm gonna eventually ramp back up to that productive level.
Yeah. Whenever ENTJs say that they're not productive, I'm like, oh, you only did 7 of the 15 things on your to-do list. And that doesn't feel productive to you guys.
Yeah, I mean that's 8 things you didn't do.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's less than 50% completion. That's failure.
It is.
Exactly. And then most people, they struggle with getting 3 things or even thinking about 3 things they want to do, let alone get them done. And so I'm curious what you guys think are the differences between you two as well. Like, I'm going to open the floor.
I think a good way to compare the two is like an unstoppable force versus an immovable object kind of a thing. Because I might be basing this off of just like articles and stereotypes, but the 8-wing 7 description is like a conqueror, go-getter kind of thing and like rallies people. I'm gonna slightly touch upon the meme reference we had in the beginning. Like the 8-wing 7 is the typical like alpha thing. I don't believe in that alpha sigma thing, but a bit of an explanation can help. The 8-wing 9 approach is a more like a bear kind of a thing, like wants to stay in his own world and not really a fan of the spotlight, just have its own quiet, peaceful life. But if someone tries to encroach upon that, that's like immediate explosion and just straight up not allowed. Whereas with the 8-wing 7, it's like, how much more can I get? So yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I have ambitions, but they're not about proving myself or accumulating more and more. It's about um, establishing a certain way of life that I had imagined for myself and then ensuring I can maintain it as compared to I want to be the most famous person or the richest person or something. Although it might kind of bleed over, like if I realize that for the kind of life I want, I need a lot of money, I'm going to have to work towards that. But it's not going to be for the money, it's going to be for the kind of life that I want.
Yeah, and I think another difference between these two Enneagram types is what could this ENTJ more likely be mistyped as by accident? So I think the 8-wing 7 is slightly more likely to look a little bit more ENTP-ish because they like to toe the line, see how much they can innovate until they get in trouble, or it's trying to see how much they can get revenge on someone until they get in trouble too. So there is a little bit of that where the ENTJ who's 8-wing 9 can be mistyped more likely as an INTJ. And there is more of that liking solitude, taking a while to trust people.
Yeah, I for me, I've noticed from my perception at least, I feel like the 8-wing 9, it has a very like self-preservation type of outlook. Like even if we talk about instincts, along with Enneagram, that I guess maybe it's also because Shiv is a you mentioned your self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's also doubling down my perspective of that, but it does seem like it very yeah, you're like a very good example of that whole self-preservation instinct. Very I don't want to say materialistic, but like what word would you use? Like very rugged?
Territorial, I'd say.
Territorial. Yeah, that's a good one. Whereas for me, I feel like I think my instinct also may play a part into it. I have the sexual or one-on-one instinct, which does have a certain like it enjoys flavors, intense experiences, traveling, all that good stuff. And it does feel like this 7-wing really brings that out.
Mhm.
So I'm actually curious what a self-preservation 8-wing 7 might look like compared to, let's say, a sexual 8-wing 9, because I feel like maybe they're a little closer together, whereas me and Shiv may be opposite ends of our respective types, like the extreme ends.
Yeah, I have self-preservation and the sexual one. I don't have the social instinct. So I do prefer one-on-one conversations, but even in those conversations, I tend to be a bit more guarded than most people are. So it takes me a while to get comfortable with people, let's put it that way. Um, and yeah, I also realized, like, for me, a lot of my motivations are very different from the conventional ones. Like, I mean, who doesn't want more money, right? Or like when you were talking about your career, it's you quickly rose to senior and stuff like that. For me, I never thought of my career as terms of a ladder. It was more about, okay, what kind of jump can we make? So it was about, okay, I want a career that is something is in an industry of the nature that I would enjoy, like engineering or game development or something. And then it was like, well, now I want to work at better pay and then work on things that I care about. And so it's it's my own metric that I try to follow. It's not like a pre-established social metric that I'm trying to adhere to. I guess it kind of really stands out from that whole this is what a successful career thing looks like.
Hmm.
But I mean, it does work for me, and the amount of effort I've had to put into, because when you're kind of navigating your career on your own metrics, the guidance you get doesn't always line up with it. So you're kind of the
Yeah.
master of your own career in that sense. And so far it's yielded good results, which makes me think that the intuition I have, which is guiding my career decisions, seems to be on point for now. And I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. But like Abhishek mentioned, I'm a bit more cautious. I might like play around with the rules a little bit, but if I know that it can get me in serious trouble, I would do a risk assessment of whether it's worth it or not before, breaking said rule.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess for me, I think chasing goals was sort of like a goal in and of itself. Like I could live comfortably with like I'm very low maintenance. I don't have that much stuff. When I travel cheaply, so that's my only real major expense.
Hmm.
But it's like in school, you always had a grade the next year. Like as long as you stuck to the path, you graduate. You'd go up from grade 2 to grade 3, and then like for the first few years of my career, it was always like every year you get a promotion or so. It's not exactly a year, maybe take a year and a half in some cases, 8 months in others, but like you had that steady sense of progression. But I think now I'm hitting the point where like I can't grow every year. I had my first year where I can't actually say if I've grown as a person from like me a year ago. Like I have new skills here and there, but like it's less tangible. So I think that's where the FI starts to come in. You really have to, yeah, like just you're the master of your own fate, which is a good, like an amazing thing, but also like, yeah, like what do you do with that?
Yeah, I think to shed some light on that, when I achieved that level of personal comfort I was talking about and started focusing more on the internal stuff, my goals at the time, because I was setting annual goals and stuff, were very numerical. Like, I want to make 5 friends this year and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. And I realized that because I wasn't making any progress on it quickly enough, it was negatively affecting me a lot. So after consulting with my inner circle, I moved from a more goal oriented approach to a more process oriented approach. Like, am I doing the right things? Am I putting myself in situations where I can meet like minded people? And am I being receptive? Do they find me warm and welcoming and so on? And yeah, I mean, that yielded great results. Here we are, friends, all of us. Even though it was not, measured, sometimes just keeping at something just yields good results. It's like kind of just having a discipline instead of trying to measure how far you've come. And yeah, that seemed to work. It was a little like unconventional as to, whoa, I had no metrics and I wasn't doing like monthly or bi-monthly check-ins, like how many friends have I made and how many did I estimate to make or something like that. But it did seem to work out in the end. So it I also realized that this whole experience kind of made my goal setting approach more intuitive than more rigid. So previously, I used to have like Trello boards and uh, to-do lists and documents outlining everything. Now I do use them still, but more as rough guidelines rather than absolute to the letter plans. And it's a more intuitively guided way to approaching those goals. Like, as long as I know what the high level things are, I do have this like a check-in point of how much progress have you made really, what do we think we can do with the remaining time we have, do we have a deadline or something. But again, the deadlines are now set by me, not by other people, so there's also more comfort and independence there.
Yeah. So you are seeing with the 8 wing 9, there's more of that natural introspection. You're setting goals in terms of your own metrics, in terms of yourself, whereas the 8 wing 7 is more likely to reach goals for goals' sake, in a sense.
Like
Um,
I'm like a dog with a bone. I just want to chase something.
yeah, but you'll find what's in common with both of these ENTJs is that they start with spreading themselves thin, and then they have to use their introverted feeling to see where do I really want to spend my energy. And that's usually the pathway of an extrovert. So they go very broad and diffuse at first, and then they narrow in and hone in as they grow older.
Yeah, I actually have something to add to it. So during university, I was doing like this whole turnaround thing in my life where I was trying to just become a much better version of myself. So diving heavily into self-help books and everything and just be more productive, learn more and grow and everything. And eventually I started spending too much energy on that. And like I used to be productive because being productive made me feel good. So my self-worth was kind of attached to my productivity at one point. That's something a lot of young ENTJs have been, known to feel. And at some point I realized I don't want to be productive for the sake of being productive. Like, because I realized if I don't have a long-term goal, I would want to be productive towards something than go in a wild goose chase. Like I would complete a course and learn new something, but that's something I would never actually use. Like I took salsa lessons last year. The only thing I actually used it for is like my own lightsaber moves, which I mean it's fun, but you don't need to take salsa lessons for it. So why did I even go there? And it's like instead of running around trying to be productive doing something or the other, I learned to like scale back, don't spend energy if you don't need to. Pick your battles and just focus on those and set longer, more meaningful targets. I think that's where the NI and FI kind of comes in. And I mean that seems to be working better. Like it kind of feels weird, and I guess part of me still feels bad, like I'm not chasing after it like the madman I used to be back in those days. Like if anything stands in my way, I'll obliterate it. I mean, sure, I would still, but nothing's really standing in the way at this point. So do I really need to be all gung-ho and sacrifice everything else for just one goal? I don't feel the need. There are some people who do, because you might be in a desperate situation like that if you're starting your own company, if you're trying to get out of poverty. So with all due respect to that, I'm thankfully not in such a desperate position, so I can afford to be productive towards something rather than for the sake of being productive.
Mm-hmm. So almost for ENTJs, there's this element of brute forcing it early on, and then they find out what matters to me, and then that centers them. And so I'm curious about when it comes to being an 8, how does that show up for you guys generally?
I think for me, it's more so. I think I just have a very, I guess, independent view of everything. Like I try to. I think as we both discussed, we try to minimize the influence other people have on us to try to be as objective as possible, like in the TE way. Like everything's still subjective at the end of the day, but to I guess try to come to the most like logical sort of pure approach to things based purely off of what I want, what I think is best, and in order to do that, you need to take like the world is always pushing it on you a little. Like people are telling you their opinions. You should do this. You should do that. Some of it's helpful. Most of it isn't. And naturally, to be able to achieve that level of clarity in your approach to life, you need to resist it a little and just say like, this is what I want to do. This is who I am. This is my what I got. And like the way I view being an 8 is just like having a natural like level of aggression, just to like create a little bubble around you so you can actually think and just do what you want.
I agree. Independence, you could say, is one of my strongest core values. I've wanted to be highly self-sufficient, highly independent since I was a very little child. And then other things that I kind of emphasize are, um, so I personally think of myself as like a bit of a clown, and the people who are close to me see me as a kind of warm, slightly funny, joking kind of person. But people who are at a bit of a distance do describe me as a bit detached, sometimes blunt and direct. So I think some of that 8 stereotype, even though I'm a wing 9, so of the more peaceful variety, it does creep in eventually. Like I was actually noticing in one of our panels that like I like to think of myself as someone who's, you know, smiling and warm and something, but when I was paying attention to the screen, I had this scowl on my face. And that's something people have described. Like if I'm paying attention to something, I'm just glaring. So like some of the 8 stereotype traits, I do seem to have some of those. Though it's not intentional. Um, Also, resisting pressure is something I've always wanted to do. Like Abhishek mentioned, like I would listen to when people are giving me advice or telling me, "Hey, you should do something." I would listen to it because, I mean, someone you never know when someone's giving you good advice, but I would run my own like uh, cross check on it and think if it actually makes sense for me before I actually incorporate it into my life. So you have to be kind of picky with the advice you get because if you take everyone's advice, you'll end up getting nowhere because you're stretching yourself too thin. Resisting external pressure, peer pressure, again, something that for some reason I never really felt in my life. The need to adhere to other people's standards or compare myself, or, oh, this person looks better, or that person's dating someone, or got good grades or something. It's never been that. It's been, what do I want in my life and am I on track to get that? the I I actually don't like getting competitive, which is, you know, not very ENTJ like, if you believe the stereotype. So I noticed that the only time I feel competitive is when someone else is getting great at something that I also want to be great at. Like if I know someone's a software engineer and in the same amount of time that I got to like an intermediate level, this person gets to an advanced or team lead level, I would feel a bit weird and want to put in more effort, get to that level or something. But again, that's not because I want to defeat that person. It's because I also want to be as good as I can at this thing that I actually enjoy. So if someone's better at something that I'm not so interested in, like painting or dancing or something, good for them, but I won't feel competitive. And I think that's something that surprises people when I tell them I'm an 8, but I'm not super competitive about everything. I'm not sure what Abhishek's experience with that is, though.
Actually, yeah, I don't think I'm the most competitive person either. Like I can be incredibly petty, like the story I mentioned, but like I don't think yeah, I've never really cared that much about, you know, having the best grades or the most money or, you know, like showing off in any sort of like peacocky type way. Like to me, um yeah, like I think all that stuff has just naturally just slid off me. Like it's just not been a game I wanted to play most of the time. Like it felt very small.
Yeah, I think, and let me know if you agree with this, but as an 8, being authentic and true to yourself kind
Yeah.
of makes more sense. Like, I would rather be successful in my own eyes than the whole world's, because their metrics, the metrics they measure my success by, I would not want to chase those things like fame or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's like I'm ambitious, but not for status or money. Just
Yeah.
I just want to do it for its own sake.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the difference between the 8 versus the 3, who is the ENTJ, is that 8s are themselves. They'll call a spade, and they're just being themselves. It's almost like the most stereotypically authentic types of the Enneagram are the 4 and the 8, because the 4 values emotional authenticity, but then the 8 values just being authentically themselves, no matter how blunt that is. Of course, they're going to try to modulate themselves at times, but overall, they're just themselves. And they want other people to be themselves too.
Yeah. That's actually why I have a lot of 4 friends. Like I feel like I've heard that too. 8s and 4s are like the two most value authenticity, like different ways, but it is
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas the 3 is more externally oriented, changing themselves depending on the circumstance, and more status and achievement oriented version of the ENTJ.
I do have one of my best friends is an ENTJ 3 Wing 4, and they also value authenticity a lot. We even did this shared core values exercise, trying to determine what our values are. And the one thing we kind of were different upon was how we wanted to appear to people. So my 3 Wing 4 friend wanted to appear successful to people and was very comfortable acknowledging their need for validation from people when it came to how successful they appear and how competent they appear. For me, when I discovered that, I mean, ENTJs have this tribe validation need. And when I discovered that, I was trying to just overcome that need for validation. Like, how can I learn to not need it? Because if I need it and others are not giving it to me, then I'm losing control over my own life. And that was kind of freaking me out. But my 3-wing-4 friend was completely comfortable with it.
Yeah, like I always thought I didn't need it until I just like got it randomly, and I was like, oh shit, that's kind of nice. Like, but yeah, it's I think some threes around can be good for
Mhm.
getting you that every once in a while.
Cool. And on that note, thank you both for coming up today and describing your Enneagram differences and similarities. And so Shiv has been at his round of participating in panels today, so kudos to you. Even though the 9-wing has an introspective quality, you're like, it is my goal to make more friends. So I'm going to put myself out there. So thank you. It's been nice to become closer friends. And Abhishek, we were talking about how ENTJs have very cohesive backgrounds. So they're just so conveniently well coordinated with their outfit and their background. It's just
Yeah,
well done.
sure.
I'm like,
Yeah,
huh,
thank you.
that's just happening right now. So maybe SE tertiary? Question mark.
Yeah, bro.
Then whereas sometimes I'll have INTPs with toilet paper in the background and they really don't care. it's like you know it's gonna be recorded, right? And they're like,
Yeah,
drug. All right, yeah.
Don't feel bad, INTPs.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's totally fine.
It's all show. Like if I turn the camera 5 degrees that way, like you'll see a massive mess. So
Oh, so sweet of you.
yeah.
And so thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye bye.